Hey everyone, and welcome to our deep dive. Today we're going to be taking a close look at Shilpa Medicare and their performance in Q2 of fiscal year 2025. We've got their investor presentation right here in front of us, which is great because it gives us a direct window into how the company wants to present itself. You ready to dive in?
Absolutely. I always find investor presentations fascinating. You can really see the story they're trying to tell along with all the numbers and data.
Okay, so before we get into the nitty-gritty of Shilpa Medicare, let's zoom out for a second and talk about the big picture. The global pharmaceutical industry. What's the overall outlook like these days? Because that context is so crucial for understanding how any individual player fits in.
Yeah, you're absolutely right that context is key. And Shilpa Medicare is definitely operating in a space with tons of potential. The global pharmaceutical industry is projected to grow significantly in the coming years. You've got factors like an aging population around the world, rising healthcare spending, and the constant demand for new and better treatments. All that points towards a very positive outlook, and it seems like Shilpa Medicare is banking on that growth.
That makes a lot of sense. So it sounds like there's plenty of room for a company like Shilpa Medicare to really thrive. But let's get down to the specifics. What exactly does Shilpa Medicare do? I mean, I know they're in pharmaceuticals, but what's their business model like? What are their main revenue streams?
So they've got a pretty diverse portfolio. It's not just one thing. A major part of their business is in the API market. API stands for active pharmaceutical ingredients, which are basically the raw materials used to make drugs.
Okay, got it. The building blocks of medications.
Exactly. And they're big in both oncology and non-oncology APIs. And they even offer CDMO services.
Hold on, back up a sec. What are CDMO services again? I always get those industry acronyms mixed up.
No worries. It stands for Contract Development and Manufacturing Organization. Basically, it means they're not just making the ingredients themselves. They're actually helping other pharmaceutical companies develop and manufacture their drugs, too.
Oh, so they're like the behind-the-scenes partners for a lot of medications.
Yeah.
We might not even realize. That's fascinating.
Yeah, it's like being a one-stop shop for drug production.
And this API segment, how big of a chunk of their business are we talking?
It's significant for sure. In Q2 of fiscal year 25, their API business brought in a whopping 55% of their total revenue.
Wow. Okay, so that's their bread and butter right now.
It is.
But they're not putting all their eggs in one basket, right? They have other things going on as well.
Right. While the API segment is huge, they've been strategically branching out. They're getting into formulations, which basically means producing those finished medications.
Yeah.
The pills, the capsules, the injections that people actually use.
So that's where they take that next step. From the raw ingredients to the actual drugs patients are taking.
Precisely.
And are they mostly focused on the domestic market in India? Or are they going international with this as well?
They're definitely making moves internationally. They're signing licensing and service agreements. And their focus seems to be on niche and complex generics. So they're not just competing on price. They're offering unique or specialized products.
Okay, that's interesting. So they've got the core API business. They're expanding into these formulations. And there was something else, right? Biosimilars. Now that's where it starts to sound a bit more high-tech to me.
It is a rapidly evolving area. Biosimilars are essentially similar versions of those really complex biologic drugs, the ones derived from living organisms. These tend to be more expensive to develop and produce, so biosimilars offer a more affordable alternative potentially.
I see. So it's about making these cutting-edge treatments accessible to more people, which is huge. And it seems like Shilpa Medicare is all in on this.
It seems so. They've got adalimumab and aflibercept in clinical trials, and they've already signed some licensing agreements.
Wow, they're really moving and shaking.
They are, and they're not stopping there either. They've got other areas they're involved in, like recombinant albumin and a transdermal portfolio, which shows you just how diverse their revenue streams are.
So it's like they're covering a lot of ground, from the fundamentals to the cutting edge of pharmaceutical innovation. But with all these different areas they're in, what's fueling their growth right now? What are the big drivers that are making them tick?
Well, one major factor is new product launches. They just launched the first generic nilotinib in the EU, a market estimated at around $413 million. And they've got another one coming up, axitinib, which will be launched once a patent expires next year.
Well, they're not wasting any time. It seems like they're really aggressive about capitalizing on these opportunities, especially in the EU.
Absolutely, and they've got their sights set on the U.S. market, too. They recently received 2 FDA approvals, one for Pemetrexed RTU, which is a ready-to-use formulation, and another one for bortezomib RTU, which is particularly notable because that's the first to get approval. For both intravenous and subcutaneous administration, they're partnering with Amneal for this product. And the U.S. market for that drug alone is estimated to be worth around $96 million.
Those FDA approvals are huge. It shows they can meet those really rigorous U.S. standards, which is no easy feat.
It definitely is.
And from what you're saying, it doesn't seem like they're limiting themselves geographically either.
Nope. They've partnered with a leading European generics company, and they're also strategically expanding into emerging markets.
So it's a global approach.
It is a smart approach. They're not just relying on one region for growth, they're casting a wider net.
And their CDMO business is growing right alongside their own product development, with new projects signed for the U.S. market.
Exactly. It's like they're firing on all cylinders.
They are. And let's not forget about those strategic partnerships we touched upon earlier. Those seem to be playing a huge role in their success as well.
Absolutely. Those collaborations are key.
Their partnership with Unicisive Therapeutics for oxalanthanum carbonate, or OLC, is a great example. The FDA accepted their NDA for this product, and they're aiming for a launch in June 2025.
And what's interesting about that partnership is that Shilpa Medicare is the sole supplier of both the drug substance A and D, the drug product, for Unicisive. It shows how deeply involved they are and highlights their ability to handle these complex projects from start to finish.
It's a real vote of confidence in their capabilities. Plus, they have an ongoing NDA program with a fast-track designation. So they're not just churning out generic after generic. They're focused on innovative, high-demand products.
Exactly. They seem to be very intentional about the projects they take on.
It's impressive how they're balancing all these different avenues for growth. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to the numbers, right? So let's talk financials. What's the story their Q2-FY25 results are telling?
Well, from a revenue perspective, things are looking very positive. They saw an 11% year-over-year growth, reaching 348.8 crore rupees, which is already impressive. But what's even more remarkable is the quarter-on-quarter growth, a whopping 16%. They actually exceeded analyst expectations on that one. And if you look back, they've now had 8 consecutive quarters of EBITDA improvement.
8 quarters in a row.
Yeah.
That's a pretty consistent upward trend. Makes you wonder if they have some secret sauce over there.
Maybe they do. But beyond just revenue, we need to look at profitability. And there, too, the news is good. Their EBITDA margin is sitting at a healthy 26% for Q2, and it's been steadily climbing for the past year.
So they're not just growing, they're growing profitably, which is a key distinction. But I'm curious, what's the story behind those numbers? What's driving this financial success?
Well, if we dig into the details of their financials, and by that I mean their profit and loss statement, their balance sheet, and their cash flow statement, a few things jump out. Their P&L shows robust revenue generation and good cost management. Their balance sheet indicates financial stability, with a strong asset base and low debt levels. And their cash flow statement highlights their ability to generate cash from operations. It's the kind of picture you want to see as an investor.
Okay, so they're financially sound and generating cash, which is crucial for funding future growth, right?
Absolutely.
But every company is ultimately guided by the people at the helm. So what could you tell us about Shilpa Medicare's leadership? Who's the mastermind behind all of this?
The key figure here is Mr. Vishnukant Putata, the managing director. He's been instrumental in shaping the company's strategy, innovation, operational excellence, and those strategic partnerships we talked about. That's all his vision.
It sounds like he's got a clear direction for the company. Yeah. And judging by the recent performance, it seems to be working pretty well.
It does. And from his comments in the presentation, he's very optimistic about their future growth. He really emphasizes their commitment to addressing unmet medical needs. It's clear he sees Shilpa Medicare playing a significant role in shaping the future of healthcare, and he's confident in their ability to deliver on that vision.
That's great to hear. Passionate leadership can make all the difference. But even with a great track record and a visionary leader, there are always potential roadblocks, right? What are some of the challenges that Shilpa Medicare might face as it continues to grow?
You're absolutely right. No business is immune to risks. For Shilpa Medicare, one of the biggest challenges is the highly competitive nature of the pharmaceutical industry, especially when it comes to generics. The pressure to keep prices low while maintaining quality is constant.
Yeah, competition is fierce. It's a global market, so they're up against players from all over the world.
Exactly. And then you have the ever-present hurdle of regulatory approvals. The pharmaceutical industry is heavily regulated, and getting new products approved can be a long and complex process. Any delays or setbacks there can really throw a wrench in their plans.
It's like a high-stakes game where the rules are always changing. And speaking of global factors, let's not forget about currency fluctuations. those can impact their international business pretty significantly.
Absolutely. Those fluctuations can eat into profit margins and make it harder to predict financial performance. So while they're doing well now, they'll need to navigate these challenges carefully as they continue to expand globally.
Right. It's all about staying agile and adaptable in a constantly evolving environment. Well, we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive. We've talked about their diverse business model, their impressive growth drivers, their strong financial performance, and even the leadership that's guiding them forward.
And we've also taken a realistic look at some of the risks they face, which is crucial for getting a complete picture of their situation. But we've only just scratched the surface. There's still so much more to explore.
I'm ready for more. Let's keep digging.
We've talked about their impressive performance so far, but what I'm really curious about is their strategy moving forward. They seem to be very deliberate in how they're approaching growth.
Oh, absolutely. They're not just, throwing things at the wall and seeing what sticks. They've got a clear focus on specific areas within pharmaceuticals.
Exactly. Their investor presentation really highlights their focus on certain therapeutic areas. Oncology is a major one for them.
Makes sense. Cancer is a global health challenge, and the demand for effective treatments is only going to increase. And they already have that strong foundation in oncology APIs, so it seems like a natural progression to build on that expertise and develop new formulations.
Right. They're taking what they know and expanding upon it. And it's not just oncology, they're also investing heavily in nephrology treatments for chronic kidney disease, another area with a growing global need.
So they're aligning themselves with major health trends, focusing on areas where they can make a real impact, which is a smart move, especially in such a competitive market like pharmaceuticals.
It is. And speaking of competition, it's interesting to see how Shilpa Medicare is using strategic partnerships to their advantage. Remember that oxylanthanum carbonate project we talked about? Their collaboration with Unisys Therapeutics is a perfect example of how these partnerships can benefit both sides.
Oh, definitely. Shilpa Medicare brings their manufacturing expertise to the table, and Unisys Therapeutics provides their clinical development and regulatory know-how. It's like a perfect match.
Exactly. And this isn't just a one-off thing for them. They're actively seeking out these collaborations with other pharmaceutical companies, research institutions, even universities. They seem to understand that in this industry, working together can often be more efficient and effective than going it alone.
It's like they're building this global network of expertise. It not only gives them access to new technologies and markets, but also helps spread the risk and cost associated with developing new drugs.
Precisely. It's a smart strategy, especially for a company with global aspirations like Shilpa Medicare. But partnerships are just one piece of the puzzle, right? They're also making significant investments in their own internal capabilities.
Oh, for sure. They're not just relying on others. They're constantly upgrading their own manufacturing facilities, investing in state-of-the-art equipment, expanding their production capacity.
And that's key, especially as they venture into more complex medications and increase production to meet that growing demand.
It's like they're laying the groundwork for long-term sustainable growth. But it's not just about bricks and mortar. I noticed they're also emphasizing their investment in their people.
Absolutely. In a knowledge-driven industry like pharmaceuticals, your people are your most valuable asset. They're focused on attracting and retaining top talent, providing professional development opportunities, and fostering a culture of innovation.
It sounds like they're creating an environment where their employees can thrive and contribute to the company's success. But all this investment wouldn't mean much without a strong R&D engine, right? What are some of the key areas where Shilpa Medicare is focusing its research efforts?
Well, one area that really stood out to me is their work on new drug delivery systems. They're exploring things like transdermal drug delivery, using patches, which can be a game changer for patients who need long-term medication. It's about making treatments more effective and more convenient.
That's so cool. It's like they're taking those classic sci-fi concepts and making them a reality.
Right, and they're not stopping there. They're also heavily involved in the development of complex generics. Remember, we talked about how they're not just focusing on simple me-too generics. They're tackling those more challenging medications that require specialized technologies and formulations.
That's a smart move. It allows them to stand out from the crowd and potentially command a higher price for their products. It's like they're going for quality over quantity.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's their ongoing work on biosimilars, which we discussed earlier. These are all high-risk, high-reward areas of research, and it shows how ambitious they are. They're not afraid to push boundaries and take on complex scientific challenges.
It's inspiring to see them not just following trends, but actually shaping them.
They're not just riding the wave, they're creating their own wave. They're really setting themselves up as a force to be reckoned with in the global pharmaceutical industry.
And all of this is happening with an Indian company. It speaks volumes about how much the Indian pharmaceutical industry has evolved.
Absolutely. Shilpa Medicare is a prime example of how Indian companies are now competing and excelling on a global scale.
Yeah.
They're not just manufacturing generic drugs for the domestic market anymore. They're innovating, developing new therapies, and making a real impact on healthcare worldwide.
It's a remarkable story. But we're not done yet. There's still more to uncover about Shilpa Medicare and what their journey means for the bigger picture. All right, so we spent the last two parts really getting to know Shilpa Medicare, their business, their strategies, their ambitions.
It's remarkable how they've achieved these great financial results, but they've also really positioned themselves for more growth in the future. It's tough to do in such a competitive industry.
Yeah, they've really found that sweet spot, balancing success now with a clear vision for the future. But let's zoom out a bit. What does Shilpa Medicare's story tell us about the bigger picture, the Indian pharmaceutical industry as a whole?
Yeah, if we think about the bigger picture, Shilpa Medicare is like a perfect example of what's happening in Indian pharma right now. It's going way beyond just producing generic drugs. For the domestic market, companies like Shilpa are showing that India can innovate, they can compete globally, and they can be a major player in developing new therapies.
So it's not just made in India anymore, it's more like innovated in India.
Exactly. And it's not just about cheaper versions of existing drugs, it's about pioneering new drug delivery systems, tackling those complex generics, and even venturing into biosimilars like we talked about.
So they're really setting a new standard for the whole industry.
Absolutely. And this has huge implications, not just for India, but for global healthcare. If Indian companies like Shilpa can develop and manufacture these high-quality, affordable medications, it could really change how millions of people around the world access healthcare.
It's like a ripple effect,
Yeah.
starting in India and spreading outward. But this kind of change doesn't happen overnight, right? What are some of the factors that have made this shift possible in the Indian pharmaceutical industry?
Well, one big factor has been the government's support. They've been really supportive of the pharmaceutical sector, implementing policies that encourage R&D investments, streamlining those regulatory processes, and just generally promoting the growth of the industry.
So it's like a team effort, government initiatives working hand in hand with private sector innovation.
Exactly. And then there's the talent pool in India. You've got this huge number of highly skilled scientists, engineers, researchers who are now contributing to these cutting-edge pharmaceuticals.
Right, and all that expertise is only going to grow. As more young people go into STEM fields, it really seems like India is in a great position to become a global leader in pharmaceuticals.
They definitely have the potential, but as with any industry, there are still challenges. One of the key ones is consistency, ensuring consistent quality, and that they're following international regulatory standards.
That's critical, building trust and credibility on a global scale, especially in an industry where quality is so important.
Absolutely. And then there's intellectual property protection. India needs to keep strengthening its patent laws to encourage more innovation and attract more foreign investment.
So it's a complex landscape, but one with massive potential. And companies like Shilpa Medicare are leading the charge, showing what's possible when you combine innovation, strategic thinking, and a global outlook.
They are, and their journey shows us that the pharmaceutical industry isn't just dominated by Western companies anymore.
It's a global game now, which is exciting.
It is. And for anyone looking to invest in companies with a global impact, this is definitely something to pay attention to.
That's a great point. Before we wrap up, what stands out to you the most about Shilpa Medicare's story? What's that one key takeaway you'll remember from this deep dive?
I think for me, it's their agility. They're adaptable. They're not afraid of new technologies, new markets, and they're always evolving their business to stay ahead of the curve. In such a fast-changing industry like pharmaceuticals, that's essential.
I agree. They're not just reacting to change. They're anticipating it and getting ready to capitalize on those new opportunities. That's what makes them different.
Exactly. And that forward-thinking mindset is what will determine their success in the long run. They don't just want to be a successful Indian company. They want to be a global leader, and they're doing everything they can to achieve that.
Well said. All right, folks, that wraps up our deep dive into Shilpa Medicare. We've covered a lot of ground, from their strong financials to their ambitious plans for the future. And we've also looked at what their success means for the Indian pharmaceutical industry and the global healthcare landscape.
We hope you found this journey through the world of pharmaceuticals as interesting as we did.
And remember, this is just the beginning. We encourage you to keep exploring these topics and learn more about this exciting industry. Until next time, keep those minds curious and those questions coming down.